Today we're going to be talking about the excretory system. So this can be the title on your notebook page. We've been talking about the respiratory system. The respiratory system helps us breathe, exchange gas, provides oxygen for us to make energy. And the other thing is it gets rid of CO2, which is technically considered a waste product. The reason we're talking about the excretory system next is because the excretory system is our kidneys and our bladder, and it gets rid of waste in a different way. So these are our waste products from our blood. So both the respiratory and the excretory system play a role in removing waste. So let's go ahead and write down a definition for the function of the excretory system. The excretory system removes nitrogenous waste from the body. Nitrogenous is a new word. I want you to take a look. What word do we see in nitrogenous? We see the word nitrogen. So it's waste that contains nitrogen, and we want to get rid of this from the body. You'll see it involves the kidneys and the bladder, so we'll be talking about those different parts in a minute here. So where does this waste come from? Well, waste with nitrogen comes from proteins. Remember, proteins have CHON, C-H-O-N. Those are the letters they're made up of. So that's where our nitrogen, the N, comes from. And when we break down proteins and we get this waste with nitrogen, it's actually really toxic to the body, which is why we have to remove it. If you've heard of anybody who has had kidney problems or kidney failures, your kidney is what helps remove this waste. And pretty much if your kidneys stop working correctly and start failing, the toxic substances, the toxic waste will build up in your body and eventually cause you to die. So kidneys are super, super important. If you ever hear of somebody who is having kidney failure, it's usually not a good sign. So let's take a look at this diagram, all right? So we're going to focus here mostly on proteins. DNA, nucleic acids, also has nitrogen, but we're going to focus mostly on proteins. So proteins, by your digestive system, broken down into amino acids, right? And amino acids have CHON, and N is the thing here that's going to make some of these substances toxic. So if we think back to pretty early times, fish were some of the first organisms to evolve. And so they have a really simple excretory system. And so what they do is they take the nitrogens and hydrogens and they convert it into something called ammonia. Ammonia, you might have, it's a cleaner. It's kind of similar to bleach. It's super basic, but you don't want too much of it in your body. And so what the fish do is they convert it to ammonia, and then they just get rid of it directly into the water. So like, hey, we have this toxic ammonia, just get rid of it into the water that they live in. Mammals and birds have a little bit more sophisticated excretory system. You'll see mammals, amphibians, sharks, some bony fishes. What they mean by bony fishes, basically some fish that have skeletons. There's lots of different types of fish. But these organisms convert it to something called urea. Okay? And so urea, you can see, has nitrogen. Okay, it's also got carbon and oxygen. And then birds, insects, and reptiles convert it to something called uric acid, which has nitrogen as well. And basically with urea here, it's a lot less toxic, and uric acid is less toxic as well. And there's different reasons why they convert it into each one. So let's go down ahead and write this down. So there's different types of waste produced depending on what kind of organism you are. So ammonia, remember that's the really simple one? That's what the fish produce. So aquatic animals. Mammals produce urea, That's what we're going to be talking about. So we're mammals. And then birds produce uric acid. And so they're just different forms of nitrogen waste. This one, ammonia, is pretty toxic. These are less toxic. And we're going to talk about how our body makes it less toxic. So, first of all, we do produce ammonia. Remember ammonia from the little fishies, the aquatic animals? We produce ammonia, but we convert it into urea, which is less toxic. So our liver helps do this. Remember we said that our liver detoxifies blood. It helps like get rid of alcohol and drugs. And so it also helps get rid of the toxic ammonia. So they combine it with CO2 and it makes urea, which is less toxic. So urea is the form of waste that humans have. What happens to this urea? We have this diagram. Just ask me for this diagram when you get back if you don't have it. And so we're going to be labeling parts on this diagram. So the first thing that happens is after it goes to the liver, right? It's in our bloodstream, this urea, okay? And the renal artery carries blood to the kidney. Remember, artery away from the heart? Okay, so it's going away from the heart to the kidney. It's pretty impossible to tell the difference in this picture, which is the artery and the vein. The only thing we can tell, though, is that one is coming to the kidney, so that's the artery, and then when going away is the vein. So at the end of this, right, after it goes to the kidneys, the renal vein is going to carry it back to the heart. Okay, so our kidneys are kind of acting like a filter. They're detoxifying. We'll talk about how all that happens in a minute. So next up, we're going to label the kidney. So the kidney are these bean-shaped structures, and the kidney is responsible for filtering blood. And as a result, after it filters blood, all the stuff it filters out becomes urine. We'll talk about what actually is in urine a little bit later. So urine here is, remember that urea, okay? The urea was made from ammonia in our liver. It's also got salt in it, salts, sodium, chloride, and then water. After the kidney filters it, the waste is then going to go to the bladder. So there's these little tubes called ureters. And these are tubes that carry the urine from the kidney to the bladder. Now remember, our blood's coming in here, it's getting filtered. The clean blood's going back out, but then all the waste is going to go down here to our bladder. And our bladder then, we have it labeled, is going to store our urine. Now back in our digestive system unit, we've talked about rings of muscles that help kind of seal things off. And so we have a ring of muscle here. This is a sphincter. So that's what this line is pointing to. So if you want to go ahead and write that on your diagram, you can. I don't have it typed in here, but S-P-H-I-N-C-T-E-R. And then it's going to go out. There's a tube, and it carries urine to the outside of your body. And so the urethra then is the tube, and it becomes the hole to the outside of your body. So those are the parts of the excretory system. We're going to dive a little deeper now into the kidney. The kidney's kind of complicated. See, there's all these parts. So here are blood vessels, right? Blood going in, veins going out. And there's these millions of little things, all these little tiny passageways. So I also have a diagram for you, this diagram as well, that you can take a look at or grab from me when you get back. All right, so inside of our kidney, there are things, these little tubes, millions of them, 1 million. So these are like pretty microscopic. They are little tiny sections of the kidney. We said kidneys filter blood. Well, the question is, how do they filter blood? Well, they have these little filters in them, 1 million little filters. They're called nephrons. So this whole thing together is called nephron. Now we know that the artery is going to bring blood in. So we can show the renal artery here. Now, because there's millions of these, this isn't like the one and only renal artery. This is like a branch of it, or a capillary from the renal artery. And then after it's done being filtered, the renal vein is going to take it back, okay, back towards the heart. So we have those two things labeled. So first thing that happens is the blood goes into the renal artery, into the structure. It's called the glomerulus, and this is just a whole bunch of blood vessels. Okay, this is where stuff is gonna start to get transferred into our waste. So the yellow here is where our waste is going, and it's gonna end up eventually at the ureters and bladder. Anything that we want to stay in the bloodstream is gonna stay along here. So we have this ring here. This is the first part of the nephron, called Bowman's capsule. If you think of a capsule, it's usually like a circular or a sphere, and this is gonna do the filtering. And it filters out a whole bunch of stuff. Urea, water, salts. So it filters a whole bunch of stuff out of the blood, and this stuff is going to go on to form our urine. So this is called filtration. And sometimes you'll hear this called as like, oh, the filtrate now is going. So filtration to filter it. Now, in the process, it might take some extra stuff like sugar or, some extra salts that it doesn't actually need to take. So it filters a whole bunch of stuff, and then down here, we're going to get another chance for it to go back into the bloodstream. So we said the glomerulus, these are small branches of the renal artery, and they go inside the Bowman's capsule. Okay, so blood's coming in, a whole bunch of capillaries, and this is where we're getting filtering happen. From there, it's going to go to the tubule, this whole section here, right? This is our waste. It's going to reabsorb water. It'll help reabsorb, let's say, for example, sugar. We want sugar to be in our bloodstream so that it can go to the rest of the cells. So it's going to reabsorb water and anything else that we think is important to have back in our bloodstream. So things that should be in our blood would be things like sugar or red blood cells. We don't want red blood cells or sugar in our urine. Okay? So anything that doesn't end up staying in our bloodstream can get reabsorbed in the tubule. And some of the water that's taken out goes back into the bloodstream too. If we took all the water out of the bloodstream, that would not be a good idea. So some of the water gets reabsorbed depending on signals from your brain saying, oh, we need more water, we need less water in our body, all of those things. So speaking of the brain, we have a hormone, okay, it's called ADH, anti-diuretic hormone. We'll talk about what a diuretic is in a minute. And so this tells the kidney to reabsorb water based on how much water you've got in the rest of your body, and a bunch of other things. So from the tubule then, it's going to go to the ureter here. And then this is called excretion, right? Getting rid of waste, to excrete. And remember, the ureter goes to the bladder, and then the bladder goes out to the rest of the body, or outside of the body. Again, overview, blood vessels come in, get filtered here at the Bowman's capsule, stuff gets reabsorbed at the tubule, Okay? And the waste, which is water, salts, urea, goes to the bladder and out. So what's a diuretic? It is a substance that causes you to pee, is the short. It increases the amount of water in your urine, so it makes you pee, and it also can make you dehydrated. So an example of this is caffeine, alcohol. So people who are drinking lots of caffeine or lots of alcohol have to pee a lot, and because they're peeing a lot, they're getting rid of a lot of the water in their body. And it's because their brain is telling them, oh my gosh, we have to get rid of all this water, but their brain is sending a kind of messed up signal, and your body doesn't actually need to get rid of that water. So this is different from when you just like drink a whole ton of water and then you have to pee a lot, because then you're peeing because you're hydrated and your body has plenty of water. A diuretic is a substance that tricks your body into thinking you need to get rid of water and pee, and in the end causes you to become a little bit more dehydrated. So it is not a bad thing to have caffeine. We're just talking about, when you have lots and lots of it, it can cause your body to become dehydrated.